guys, my name is Nathan Malone. I'm a product marketing manager at Monograph, and we have the privilege of having Leah Bayer, who's president at Architects FORA and also president of Silicon Valley AIA. And in this session, we're going to be taking a look inward as we try to find, retain, and grow amazing talent. Leah is going to be talking about debunking the hiring myth, challenging the status quo, and revealing how transparent and authentic business practices can create loyalty and demand from current and prospective employees.
Great. Thank you so much, Nathan. I'm excited too. I am Leah Bayer, president of Architects FORA. Excited to talk to you all today about a really important aspect of what we do, which is hiring and retaining great staff. Let's take a look at this slide from AIA's economic forecast that they produce every year, which shows that there's a significant and growing backlog in architecture that is continuing to climb this year. There's a lot of new work out there, which is great, but also means that staff and or more efficient processes are necessary, right? It's also very in line with what we see from Monograph's 2021 Best Practices report. Over 80% of architecture firms are planning to hire this year. And that's a lot of competition. So to further complicate things, we're in the midst of what we've all heard now is the Great Resignation, right? That yellow line up there is people quitting their jobs in 2021 relative to prior years, which is insane. This is all industries in the US, but it does affect the architecture industry as well. So as firm owners, we're dealing with both the compounded challenges of needing to find new staff, but also to keep our current staff who are more and more likely to leave us, which is scary. And so it looks like, yeah, you guys are all finding this more challenging as well this time. So back to who we are for a moment. As I mentioned, I'm the owner and president of Architects FORA, and we are also on this journey with you in the midst of the chaotic hiring process as a youngish firm scaling up. Architects FORA was actually formerly OJK Architecture and Planning, but also EVIA Studio, and we're a 6-month-old, 3-year-old, and 40-year-old firm. So if you're confused, let's see if I can clarify that really quickly. I started a practice in 2018 called EVIA Studio, which was a completely virtual firm focused on sustainable residential design. I had the goal of wanting to leave the Bay Area and start a family, and didn't want to have that hold me back from starting a business or disrupting the business. And I also wanted to support other people who were similarly wanted or needed flexibility in their lives. And then last year, I partnered with 2 other women who are phenomenal architects, and we together purchased OJK from the founding owner who was ready to retire. OJK has a 40-year portfolio of affordable housing based in the Bay Area, primarily San Jose, which is the type of work that me and my team at EVIA Studio really wanted to do. So it was a great opportunity to step into this market without starting from scratch. And then after buying and merging and establishing ourselves as this now hybrid of EVIA's business and operations design as a fully virtual practice, but with OJK's portfolio of work and client base, we conducted a series of workshops last summer to dig in and understand our identity, our culture, in order to develop a new brand that really represented our new team and vision for the future. So taking this back to hiring and retaining staff, why does this matter? I'd like to ask you all what you think is the most important thing to ensuring job satisfaction. What's the number one thing that's going to hire and retain your staff? I'm going to show you what your peers say, which is, again, according to that AIA economic forecast report, firm leaders are placing culture at the highest priority for satisfaction. And in fact, we see that in every report that's talking about what employees and job seekers are looking for. So we're pretty well aligned here. People want to see that your place is a great place to work, but more important is that your firm actually needs to be a great place to work. So understanding, defining, living, and protecting your firm culture authentically is super important in the hiring and retention process, which is great. I'm also seeing some other aspects in here like purpose, communication, all of that, which are also super important and I'll touch on soon. And really my goal by the end of today, this brief conversation, and I'll try to get through it all, hopefully is to identify the most important factors to hiring and retaining staff successfully, and then convince all of you that that's really the case by showing you the results of our recent hiring process. Okay, so we're this 40-year, 3-year, 6-month-old company navigating the process of scaling up as a 100% virtual firm with a culture that we've identified has vibes and values that are fun, transparent, bold, resilient, equitable, and innovative. So as a remote practice, we're heavily dependent on and supported by technology that we use. And as a company with these values, we, of course, love and use Monograph, which has helped us really understand when and how we need to grow. So we project our hiring needs by building out our project plans with our team, staffing everyone to full-time minus their overhead time. And then what we did is we filled in any remaining hours to the max fee for each project with generic staff. So this tells us a few things, what types of roles we need, how many more people we need, and then those burdens, when those burdens are heaviest throughout the year. We saw, for example, that we needed a couple more people earlier this year, and then another team member later around October. So we set out on our hiring process last month. And having heard all of the challenges from our peers, reading all of the reports, watching the news, and even having other firm owners reach out to us asking if they could borrow our staff or partner with us on projects because they were struggling with hiring, we knew we were headed for a challenge entering the hiring market. So before I get into what we did, I'd love to hear, what have you all been doing if you're a firm leader? What have you been seeing if you're a job seeker to attract job candidates and secure acceptances for your offers? Please share in the chat. How are you enticing any new hires? What are those strategies that you're using? I'd love to see those shares. Okay, so knowing that this was going to be a challenge, we studied and took to heart all of the things we've heard from job seekers, all of those reports and the news about what people are really looking for from their employer. And this is not a secret, right? All of these points we see everywhere, every single post about what employees are looking for, how to attract and retain talent. They all sort of speak to these points. And so we decided to experiment and craft a job posting that was really more like a sales pitch, where we put all of who we are and what we offer that aligns with what people want at the forefront of our posting. And in the interest and alignment with our value of transparency, we really laid out all of our cards on the table, which made us a little bit anxious. But we, what do we have to lose, right? We figured we'd try something different and see what happens. So what does that mean? What is actually on our cards? I'm going to get into a little bit of detail there. In the years since starting Evia, I've put a lot of thought and energy into practice, which is why I'm here and I love this place. And I think why you guys are all here also. I've enjoyed really digging into and trying to project what the business of architecture and the world in general might look like in the future. What are our pitfalls? What are we struggling with? What are we doing well? Where are we heading? How can we better support people to live full, happy, successful lives in this new era? One of those decisions I made to support the effort of building a forward-facing practice, as I mentioned, was going remote, which was serendipitous, having done so prior to the pandemic. A lot of people, it was challenging. A lot of people thought it wasn't doable, but as we've seen after a couple of years of COVID, it's definitely doable and actually preferred by many, with an overwhelming percentage of employees wanting some or all remote work options moving forward. Another strategy we developed is a totally flexible schedule based on an 80-hour for every 2-week structure, wanting people to be able to blend or separate their work and life as they need for their own circumstances and adapt that schedule over time because things change and we need different things at different periods in our life. This led us to building on a really robust asynchronous set of tools and systems for communication and transparency, such as Monograph, which now supports our team all over the country from Alaska to New York and sometimes in France for one of our jet-setting team members. A number of our other strategies that we implemented include providing a day per week for learning and research to develop well-rounded designers, providing technology and education stipends, a flexible health plan, retirement plans, mutual mentorship, regular one-on-one career development meetings, all of these things focused on investing in the growth and well-being of our people. And then more recently, we've been looking at pay equity and diversity in practice. And last year, we studied AIA's compensation report for trends in compensation for different levels and responsibility. And we decided to strip our salaries down to a very simple 3-tier system aligned with AIA national averages, where everyone makes literally just one of 3 salaries according to their level of responsibility and assumption of risk. And then raises are given to everybody equally each year according to inflation and the success of the practice. So in our job ad, we laid all of this out very clearly. And then finally, we decided to remove all of those standard job posting requirements, such as the number of years of experience, educational background requirements, specific job titles, all of that from the ad. Again, totally an experiment. Weren't sure what was going to happen here. But it was really in recognition of the unique backgrounds that we all have. And not wanting to exclude more diverse candidates that don't meet that like typical path, and might be discouraged from applying if they don't, but otherwise would be stellar designers and great potential employees. And I think all of this sort of echoes the talks we've heard here at Section Cut so far. Karen Zabarski's Taking the Plunge, Detner Architects EDI strategies earlier today, and others are all thinking very differently in the interest of creating a better profession. So we might be a little bit crazy, but I think that we're in good company. Okay, so on to the job post. I posted this long job ad detailing everything that I described on a Sunday night and posted it to LinkedIn, Facebook, Architect, Monograph, and our website. I assumed later in the week that we'd end up paying to post on platforms like AIA and NOMA and other big job boards to further expand our reach. So walking through some of the details, we shared about us, our culture, work, mission, our quality of life commitments, our benefits package, our salary and bonus structure, our role expectations, and then some notes on the overall interview process so people knew exactly what to expect. This was Sunday night. And then Monday morning, I woke up to a pretty huge surprise. In 24 hours, we had received over 200 applications from LinkedIn. And in total, in that amount of time, we had over 300 submissions to this job ad. It was such a huge flood of applications that I had to close all of our postings, though we've continued to receive about 10 or so applications a day since then. Some stats. With such a detailed but vague ad in terms of requirements, surely the quality of applicants might be an issue, right? That's what we were thinking. This is going to be a bunch of people applying for software architecture jobs, people with no background or interest in what we do. But to the contrary, of the 313 applications that we tracked in one day of receiving applications, 67 of those were a yes and 43 a maybe to be considered for an interview. 71 of them required additional materials before we could even make a decision, like a cover letter, which we required from everybody that some people didn't submit, for example. Experience levels were pretty broad, but generally fell between 1 and 15 years of experience, most of which were directly related to the work that we do, many of which were clearly aligned with our mission from their cover letter. The caliber of applicants was pretty insane, actually. Narrowing down for an interview meant picking the best of the best out of 300 people. And my partners and I joked when we were reviewing these applications that if we had submitted for this job stacked up against the applicants that we received, we would not have been invited for an interview. It's that competitive. Okay, so then moving on to interviewing, we interviewed out of all of those applications 6 people. Half of them were invited to a second interview. And then all 3 of them that interviewed at that second interview were made offers. All 3 of them have accepted. So going back to what we learned in Monograph about needing somebody later in the year, we actually loved applicant number 3 so much that we asked if they'd be willing to work with us on defining a later start date as we navigated bringing in our new work sooner and sort of tracking what that looks like in our project Gantt chart and our staffing reports. And interestingly enough, every single interview that we had in this process was with somebody representing a minority demographic in architecture, which speaks to a whole nother layer of the equity and diversity that this type of job ad attracted. Okay, so what did we learn from this process? I'd say the experiment turned out to be a huge success. It turns out that people really do want what they say they want. Salary, I've heard that people are competing by offering people more and more money, but we did the contrary. We didn't lower our salaries, but we just said it is what it is, and it turned out not to be a negative point for the people who applied. It ended up that we had upfront alignment and agreement on what we were offering and what somebody wanted out of this process by being totally transparent. And then I'd like to point out that there really is no shortage of great talent out there. We're hearing that a lot, that people with like 5+ years experience are unicorns. But that yellow line in this slide, those are all people who are leaving or looking for something different. And so there's actually a huge amount of people that are open to new opportunities and out there. They just need us to create and provide the type of work environment that they're looking for. So at this point, we're at 100% offer acceptance rate since I created Evia. I've also yet to have somebody leave us voluntarily, fingers crossed. And I feel really just so grateful for our team, but also know that all the hard work that we put into creating a great business plays a big part in this. So I'm going to end it there and jump in the chat and take a look at these conversations you're all having. We were all really thrilled by this experiment and this process, but also I'd say a little bit concerned because we can't hire 300 people. So we're hoping to see a lot more of this transparency and challenge, everyone out there in this industry to continue to study, adapt, and evolve, and build firms for these people because they're there. They're looking for these opportunities, and without great people, our companies are nothing. So thank you, everyone, and here for any questions that might be in here.
Awesome. Thanks, Leah. That was great. We do have a few questions. It sounds like, maybe I'm reading this incorrectly, but it sounds like some people are interested in applying or something like that. So maybe you could just give a little bit of a pitch for you're showing up at the Career Center tomorrow. Or Career Fair tomorrow.
I was going to say that's a good lead into the Career Fair. So we do have an open Career Fair. We're not currently hiring for a full-time salaried position, but we do have a really great pool of 1099 contractor staff that we work with, and we're continuing to expand that team. We may be open to additional people later in the year, depending on what work hits this year. But we're also going to be rolling out an internship and scholarship program at the Career Fair tomorrow. So excited to see you there and share a bit more about that.
That's exciting. That's awesome. A few other questions. Marjane asked, FORA is 100% women-owned firm. How much do you think that influenced the kind of overwhelming and diverse response?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we had a friend of mine asked if it was all women applying. And we actually had a really good mix of gender diversity. But for a lot of the women who applied, it definitely was an important factor from their cover letter. They loved seeing that representation and leadership. And I think this is an important thing for everyone to consider is what does your leadership look like? And who are you speaking to with that, with your potential applicants? And ensuring that you are including diverse voices at your leadership level. That's something that we've heard from racially diverse people is that one of the challenges is that they don't see people in leadership that reflect who they are. And we recognize that we still have room to grow in that aspect too.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Couple questions about how you sorted through, like what kind of software did you use to get through all these applicants? How did you evaluate all of the 300+ applications that came through in a kind of an expedient manner?
Yeah, it wasn't as fast as I would have liked. And I think if you remember the opening keynote from Evelyn, I really would have loved that AI assistant. But there actually are better processes to automate that review. But I read through all of them as quickly as I could. It took me about 20 to 30 hours in a week to get through everything and mark people whether or not we wanted to consider them for an interview. And then my partners went through that list of yeses to narrow it down further. We used a platform called Monday.com, which we use for our project management. It's really flexible, though. You can use it for anything. It's kind of like ClickUp, if you've worked with ClickUp, and use that to create a series of sort of triggers for review and comment and sort of rating our preferences for the different applicants in that process. In the future, we might tailor our ad a little bit so we get less applicants. I don't know, but I'd also love to bring in some more automation in that process.
Gotcha. All right, there's a ton of questions, so I'm going to keep ripping through them in the last 2 minutes. Assuming you've hired before, how does this response compare to some of the ways that you've done in the past, maybe before you changed to this methodology?
Yeah, great question. I should have put a comparison. It doesn't compare at all. So I almost didn't post on LinkedIn this time, because the last time we posted for a position, which was about 9 months ago when we were starting to scale up, when we first took over OJK, we had such a sad number of applicants for the position on LinkedIn. And really, I think in general, probably had around 30 to 35, and of that, maybe half were even relevant. So it's night and day between the typical job ad that looks like everyone else's ads that we posted almost a year ago and what we did just a month ago.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And that brings our session to an end.